Welcome back to the Adult Volunteer Literacy Program Tutor Training. So far, we've covered our introduction to literacy and the program. We've gone over the two different types of learners we have, classroom and community learners. We've also looked at characteristics of effective tutors, learning styles, and how to set goals. Today, we are going to round up our focus on the tutor with some current best practices and how to make lesson plans. This session is incredibly important as current best practices change over time. Lesson plans are more specific for community learner tutors, but it's still a valuable tool to tutoring as it helps you manage your time and is something you can adapt to classroom tutoring. Some of these practices are going to work great there. This first section will focus on current best practices for tutoring. And the first of these is actually a reading comprehension technique that can be used for any content. This is known as KWL, or Know, Want, Learned. This is great to use at the beginning of your session or early on with a new learner to discover what they know, what they want to learn, and an easy way to tie the lesson together to what they've learned so far. In a way, this is kind of a loose lesson plan, so let's take a look at it. KWL relates to 3 steps. K, finding what the student knows already. W, deciding what the student wants to know. This could be the focus for the lesson and a way to set some short-term goals. L, what the student learned. This is great to do at the end of a lesson to allow self-reflection and see successes and gains. You can even look to see if you've accomplished your short-term goals. Let's practice and do an example for ourselves. We can explore what you know, what you want to know still, and what you've learned about adult learners. You can see a chart here on the slide with K, W, and L at the top. This is a good way to make it visual for those visual learners. So take a minute, pause the video, fill out the chart for what you already knew before tutor training about adult learners, what you still want to know, and what you've learned about our adult learners. So, how did you do? We've talked about adult learners already in a prior video called Literacy and Adult Learners, but you probably still have some questions. Hold on to this for our tutor panel, but it's pretty straightforward though, right? This is a great tool for getting to know more about your learner, setting up structure to the lesson or lessons, and keeping the tutoring focused. This is great for community and classroom learners. Now that we have one tool though, let's look at some other practices. This includes direct and indirect instruction. Tutoring is often compared to teaching, but it's vastly different. That is because there are 2 types of instruction, seen here, with teaching and tutoring falling under each of these. Direct instruction is the first type of instruction and relates to teaching the most. You can see the aspects of direct instruction here on the slide. You can use direct instruction in some instances though, such as if there's a workbook or textbook that the student needs help with, if the material within requires a lot of breaking down or subdividing for it to make sense. Another reason is you can spark a student's interest by making it relevant, making those connections, and explaining how it is practical to them. You can also make it interested or connected to real life situations and explain any questions or misunderstandings. In order for students to master learning, they sometimes need additional instruction to give clarity and ensure comprehension. If you're tutoring in a classroom, you need to direct this to the instructor. If you're tutoring in the community though, you'll need to do the instruction yourself, so you might have to do some looking up and learning. Direct instruction shouldn't be used when objectives other than learning facts, rules, or behavior sequences are desired. Direct instruction is less efficient than inquiry or problem-solving strategies. Also, direct instruction works better for lower levels of proficiency in concepts. What they don't know, they can't learn. It also isn't as effective with adult learners as they need to process the information themselves rather than be treated like a sponge. The other type of instruction is indirect instruction. This is most closely related to tutoring and adult learning. When it comes to tutoring in the classroom and in the community, this is the type of instruction that you want to strive for. You can see a list of aspects here. Some things should look familiar. Learner-centered is student-centered. Cooperative learning, so learning with the learner, is done by everyone. Organizing content, examples, experiences. Tutoring thrives in indirect instruction. Indirect instruction is also helpful for adult learners because it allows them to chew and process the information in a way best for them, as well as feeling like they're doing it themselves. Remember, this is very important for them. Something to keep in mind, though, is what experts call the zone of proximal development, or ZPD. To put it simply, it's making sure the content they are learning isn't too difficult. You want to make sure what you work on in tutoring is within their level, but just a bit more difficult. Remember what we talked about before with realistic, attainable, slightly more challenging, or even scaling back difficulty? That's what this is. A learner's zone is constantly changing. This can mean improving, meaning you need to start working on harder content, but some days this can mean regressing to easier content to find that last point of success before continuing again. As you can see, everything is related. It builds off each other as we move forward, kind of like it's sequenced this way for learning, like a lesson plan. Speaking of, let's look at lesson plans. Take a break, check your notes, write any questions, and when you're ready, hit play. Lesson plans are incredibly helpful in keeping you organized and focused, as well as give the learner and the lesson structure. Having a lesson plan will ensure that you and your learner use your time together efficiently. Help build these together off the learner's goals and interests, making it learner-centered. This shows you are committed to the learner's needs and interests. Lesson plans are non-formal in this case. You don't have to turn them in. They just give you an idea of where your learner is wanting to go and how you will get there. Essentially, a roadmap of short and long-term goals. Lesson plans are more important for community learners, but having a general lesson plan for classroom learners can help classroom tutors manage their time per learner. You can see a general lesson plan here. 5 minutes of small talk and just getting to know your learner more as a person. Remember, they're people too. You're going to be working with them a lot. This is important to build that human connection. Also, reviewing the prior content. You can even use this time to see what it is your learner wants or needs to cover in this lesson if they're a classroom learner. Review what you covered last lesson, especially if you're a community learner, or ask what they went over previously in class. Go over something the learner knows, likely the review. It's a confidence builder and begins the content on a positive note. Next, create goals for each lesson with the student. If you're a community tutor, go over what you have planned and ask what they want to focus on. If you're a classroom tutor, ask what they need to go over and create goals from that. Make them as specific as possible so you know if the learner has achieved them. Then, the new content. Sequence to build on top of what was done previously and more difficult. Try to have it be an activity, whether that be a game or using the language experience approach, which we will learn later. List out what materials you need and make sure you have them with you. This is good for you, the tutor, to keep you organized. Lastly, review the lesson and evaluate. Ask the learner if they achieved their goals for the lesson and start to set plans for the next time if tasks are unfinished. Also, discuss how the lesson went. Was there anything they really enjoyed? Something you can improve? Reflection is good for you and the learner and a way the two of you connect in shared learning. Here are a couple of examples of lesson plans you can use if you're wanting something more structured. There are also tons of lesson plan outlines online that you can explore to find something that works for you. Some tips though as you approach your lesson plans. 1. Don't assume that something is mastered the first time it's done successfully. Just because you've completed the lesson plan successfully doesn't mean you won't need to repeat it again. 2. Be prepared to adapt your lessons. It's okay to switch tracks and move in a direction that is more hands-on or away from what you have planned. This is why being prepared and adaptable are great tutor traits. 3. With adult learners, you don't want to assign homework, even though it's listed here as a component, especially if you're a classroom tutor. It's a big no-no. The instructors in the classroom will assign homework themselves. If you're a community tutor, remember to be mindful of their circumstances. They likely have jobs and other responsibilities and won't have a lot of time to sit down and complete homework. If you feel it's necessary, make sure it's related to their goals and is a review of the lesson. Nothing new. It needs to be short. Anything that would take them more than half an hour to an hour is way too long. However, now for homework for you. Look at this sample lesson plan format too. Here, you can see one filled out example and one blank. These are also in your packet. So let's try and make a lesson plan for a student named Sarah. Sarah wants to work on her reading speed for her GED test. Last time, she went over how to find the main idea in a sentence and was successful. Think of something you can work on with her this session, and remember to review. Leave the learner's comments blank for now. We will look at these together in a session later and give feedback. That's it for this session. See you next time.